Hey there, and welcome back to Planet Coaster 2. This is the blue Hyper Coaster. Today we're building the station and finishing up the queue. I want to go ahead and just take a moment before I get into anything else to pause and thank you all for a successful first Planet Coaster 2 video. I gained like 40 subscribers, and that video currently has over almost 1,000 views 24 hours later. So that is crazy. Thank you so much for watching and enjoying and commenting. A lot of love in the comments, so thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. I know like 40 subscribers doesn't sound like a lot, but I've never had a video quote-unquote pop off like that one has so far. This is the first one for sure, and I give Planet Coaster 2 all the credit because it's super hype right now on YouTube. But if you're checking out content, thank you so much for watching. Anyways, now getting into this station build, we're starting off with just like the foundation of the building using these marbles. We'll change the colors to match the rest of the build here in a moment, but these pieces are pretty fun. They work pretty well together. The textures seem to mesh when you combine those quarter pieces with the half pieces really well, and in general the pieces just look really good. Here I'm exploring what I want the roof to look like. If I'm being honest with you, I wasn't really totally sure what direction I was going with it. And you'll see in a little bit what we land. Very similar to what we just had, but a little more low-key. So for this whole entire build, I'm literally just referencing ruins, mythological ruins, Greek ruins, and just kind of taking from real-life designs. And this station, I wanted to be the center point of the queue in the design. I wanted your eye to go to it. The second you turn around at the queue, the front of the queue, you see the station, and we'll see that in a minute. I took direct inspiration from the Parthenon, and while it's definitely not a direct recreation, I think the vibe is definitely captured, and it feels like a landmark, which is exactly what I was going for. Now, one thing I've struggled with in the past is making really blocky stations, and maybe it's just the pieces in this set, but turns out this building is not blocky, and I'm really happy with the shape of it so far. Okay, unfortunately, crashes happen in brand new games, and as you can see, the station and the queue came a little bit further along, and that's just because at some point in time, whenever the game crashed, it caused a big issue, and recording stopped, and all this. It was a whole mess. But luckily, there's not a whole ton that you missed. As you can see, I added some vines to the front, and we added those queue covers. That's really it. A couple of rocks around the station. And probably the important part was the overall structure above the post, just on the front side at this moment in time. You'll see me copy and paste. So you get a better, closer look at that with those details and as you can see right there, the angles and textures and such. Just to make it up to you, since the game did crash and I lost the footage, I will go into a little more in-depth detail look to the station. This is going to be the last episode of this little mini-series, and the next one will be just cinematics and a POV. So, fortunately, you know, it's not the end of the world that we lost this footage, and we'll get a closer look at the end of the episode. So one little bug you're going to see right here is every time I add a new piece or select a new piece from the menu, the color changes back to the original, and that's actually something they addressed the day after I filmed this footage. I believe they actually released a quick patch. This is like Monday this past week, so in like November the 10th, I believe. The date might be incorrect, but point being is they fixed it literally after I recorded this, but you can see what was happening if you weren't familiar with that. It was a bit irritating. The walls were also doing it too. You saw it in the first video with the first building that I was building. One of the walls is the original color. I did fix this, and I'm glad that Frontier is working diligently and listening to the community on issues. They have, you know, a bug submission form that you can do if you experience something new. Like I've seen people commenting on Facebook posts about like these issues that I've never come across or seen, and you know they're responding to those Facebook posts saying, "Hey, go check out our bug submission form and send it that way so we can get on this and fixing it." So they're just doing a wonderful job, better than the first time. Not that there was anything wrong with the way they approached it the first time, but it just seems like there's more attentiveness and attention to detail on this game, just all the way around, including fixing these bugs. So if you're getting frustrated by little things happening in the game, if you put more hours in than I have, which I mean I've only put in a couple so far, But if you only put that many hours in, you've experienced a lot of things, I would have faith that it's going to get fixed and that Frontier is on it. Don't be afraid to use that submission button. They'll probably fix it. Now, I can't sit here and claim that this game's going to be perfect when it's completely finished, all the DLCs out and such, but if it's any indication of, how well the DLC was for Planet Coaster 1 and just how great this base game is right now, I'm pretty optimistic and hopeful for the future of this game. But turning our attention back to the build, you can see I added in those quarter walls. They're fantastic. I love that we have pieces that we can move off the grid and have on the grid. Hopefully there's more pieces like that added in the future. They're really fantastic. I was able to cover up the control center. I wasn't totally sure. I know I was talking about realism in the last episode. Wasn't totally sure where to put the control center, and I'm probably off camera going to make a fake one off to the side or box it in. There's no glass in the game yet, so it's kind of an awkward thing. You saw me using a window wall piece to try to finagle something in there, but I just couldn't get anything to work. Speaking of not getting anything to work, I'm experimenting with the roof here because I wanted it to have the same texture as the top of the triangular pieces there, but it just ended up settling on these mythological piece roofs, and I'm glad I did because it adds a really good color and contrast to the rest of the build. And in a moment I added vines to it like I do everything like I'm doing right now, and I think it just adds a lot of character to the roof, and it does give it that aged look. Going back to these vines real quick, they work perfectly with these columns. There's like 3 different narrow pieces, and they work so well with the columns. And it's not just the columns. There really is a piece for everything. There's different angles, and we didn't have this in the first game. There was like maybe this piece I'm building right now, and then the arch-looking ones, but they didn't have like all these full pieces in the game. So another home run. It just goes back to the level of detail that I feel like has been added to this game compared to the last one. They just added so many more things to it. Just look how brilliant these vines kind of hang off the roof. It just looks like it attaches. And it comes with how the vectors they made at the edge of the vines. It just looks so good, and I'm looking forward to diving into other theme sets and seeing, those details and just seeing how all the different pieces interact with each other. So moving along here, we're adding one more little section to the queue, and it's just a side facade. There's nothing crazy special about it. Still including it in the build though. It's a little more detail being added in, and just using pieces I haven't used yet. That's one thing I'm really trying to stretch myself with the rest of this build, is using pieces within the mythological set that I have not used yet. And these arches are definitely a great example of it. They have those waves on them, but there's not really a distinct huge theme to this ride. It's decently generic. I was playing with the idea of theming this after some kind of beast or god that would have taken out Poseidon or killed the other gods, but that doesn't really exist within Greek mythology. So I decided to just kind of keep it generic and not really attach any major story to it, especially with this being my first project and being a side project. I wanted all the details really to be in the build, and if the storyline added up, great, but it didn't. So we're just kind of rolling with just what we have in game and going from there. Now I will say I was a little aimless when I was building this little side facade, especially the part that's facing the pond here, but I think it turns out actually pretty solid. I don't think I had a reference image for this. I was kind of using my imagination, using some of these pieces, just adding whatever I thought looked good, and I'm pretty pleased with it. These torches that I'm adding right now actually become a really significant part of the build. As you can see, I'm adding them to the interior here. We're going to add some torches as essentially the lights in the queue a little later down the line. I'm not totally sure how I feel about it, but it does look really nice, especially at nighttime. And that actually brings me to say, I think I'm going to do a daytime and a nighttime POV in the next video. Kind of bring it back to the Roller Coaster Tycoon days when I used to make POVs. It actually makes me think of this too. One of the first videos I made for Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, when I first started getting kind of quote-unquote serious about it, was actually a hyper coaster called Vulture. And it was, video was poorly done. I was like 13 years old. Didn't look great, but on top of pulling from inspiration from Fury and Intimidator and Mako, I actually pulled inspiration from that ride as well when it comes to the layout and all that stuff. There's a lot of limitations in that game, and the fact that we've come this far to be able to make coaster's as flexible and as smooth. It's truly insane. So I'll link that down below if you're interested in watching that from a really old username, really old channel, and see if you can see any similarities between the layout of that ride and this one. Alright, jumping in here to the rest of the queue, we're going to dress up this island on the pond. And once again, we're kind of going with the theme of ruins, but also just like the fallen god concept, which, once again, I basically abandoned. A little hand there is I think it's kind of humorous, pointing straight down there. But I really like this statue that they put in the game. There's a lot of different options you can do with it, and just changing within the colors there to make it look iodized is awesome. Absolutely love it. I'm just kind of playing with some ideas here, just seeing what direction I want to go with, and you'll see in a second that I end up just kind of littering foliage around the pond just to kind of dress it up. Your eye doesn't really need to go to it, and it really just needs to feel like it's kind of just going off into not necessarily a wasteland, but to like the rest of the park. Like if you think about how this would be in a real park setting, if it's on the edge of the park and there's forest around it, like that's what's going to happen. You'll probably have fence around it in a real park, but we don't really have super great fence selection in the game quite yet. There was one fence. Let me take that back. There's great fence in the game, but there's one specific fence that I used to use in Planet Coaster 1 that if you go back and look at any of the Wonder Lake videos, you'll see it's like a yellow wooden fence, and I found something kind of similar to it, a little more raggedy looking, and you'll see that here in a moment, but it's not to the point where I'd want to like outline the edge of a path with it, or the edge of the park with it rather, so I just left this open just to kind of let the imagination flow through. Right now we're dressing up the front of the queue, right at the entrance, and this will change a little bit later down the video, just to have a more of a grandiose entrance. It's not designed yet, but it will be. And here, where actually you can see I'm looking through the different walls and such to try to find that exact fence, park fence that I want. And tried these cobblestone walls, didn't obviously fit the mythological theme. And then I realized, oh, I'm not actually in the mythological theme, so it's not really gonna work. But this is where I wanted the generic feel to happen. Played around with these wall sidings, didn't like what it looked like, and ended up settling on these resort wall trim. They're just wall trims, but like I said, they're a little raggedy looking, but they're closest that I could find to just like a generic wooden fence. And honestly, once I started adding in foliage here and rocks, and there's another building, another facade that I had, I like the way that it blends in. It does a really good job. It does its job. It doesn't need to be flashy. It doesn't need to pull your eye to it, and it kind of just shows like, hey, we're in this section, but you don't need to look at me. I'm not pretty looking. So we do experience another crash here. This is the second one of the build, and luckily haven't had any more since. So I had to redo all the fencing, the rocks, and the plants. So this looks a little different, but not to any point where it's going to like be super noticeable. I highly recommend using the autosave function. It does cause a little bit of in-game lag when it's going through the autosave, but it's not nearly as bad as Planet Coaster 1. I have mine set every 5 minutes. To be honest, I might bring that down soon, or lower. I think you can go down to like 1 minute, which is a little overkill, but if you're really working on a project that you're really serious about, I would definitely, in this early build of the game, I definitely would recommend turning on autosave, as it's saved this project twice now. So yeah, use autosave. Super grateful for it. So we're pretty much wrapping things up here at the queue. We're going to add some terrain paint just to add some barriers to the island here, to the pond rather, and the sides. Terrain painting your builds can go a long way. It has saved a lot of my builds. It kind of can help you. It directs the eye, it makes the eye ask less questions. But definitely use terrain paint around your buildings, your paths, etc. So now we're just going around adding these torches to the build just to give some light and some characters to the area. And one of the last things we're going to do here before we just jump into a last update of the park is we're finishing off the original ruin. To be honest with you, I'm not totally sure why I waited to do this last, but I'm kind of glad I did, because it ended up connecting the station to this part of the build really well. Now this is an old trick, but you can easily add diagonals. You could easily add diagonals and other interesting shapes to your buildings by just doing new builds and attaching them. Advanced moves your best friends in this case. I love using that tool, and just kind of being able to connect buildings like this is super important from avoiding really blocky builds. Luckily, this game makes it really easy to go back and forth between each building. It can get a little frustrating if you're not meaning to that. If you click on the other building while working on another one, it instantly puts you in that building without a super huge notification. But if you are trying to go in between the two builds, it's fantastic. Here's one example where I'm kind of just getting lost with these pieces. I accidentally added these arches in the queue line scenery group. So every time I tried to click on the arches, I was actually clicking on the building scenery group, and it would just automatically click on that and bring up that scenery group. So once again, I like it. That's a little tricky, but I would rather have that be an issue than how the previous game was, which I for some reason I can't like directly quote how it was, but I remember it being, you have to like X out of menus, I think, if I remember correctly, to go back and forth between buildings. So that's awesome. Love that new feature. And we love vines. We're littering this build with vines. I'm not mad about it. It looks fantastic. It's like we need like a vine counter. It's like the 4th time I've brought up vines. All right, well, moving on from that, here we're adding a last little bit of time-lapse details for the station. Yes, I'm technically cheating right now using the Viking pieces, but I think that's okay. There's no wood supports in the mythological theme, and this kind of just blended really well with the roof. So I couldn't have the roof unsupported, and these Viking pieces just fit perfectly. All right, jumping into the game here and fast forwarding. The build is now complete. You've pretty much witnessed the majority of the build, with the exception of a couple things which we'll get to here in a second. But first, I want to go ahead and give a walkthrough of the queue. So let's go ahead and do that. So first and foremost now, we have a plaza, which we're going to go into detail a little bit more in the cinematics and at the end of this episode before we wrap things up. But as you can see, we have a ride sign with a name, and that name is Curse of Cronus. Cronus is known to be the father of Poseidon. So I decided to incorporate various different things in there, and I'll go ahead and show you what those are. So let's go ahead and walk through. Nice scaled down sign here. I love that you can add these text to anything. It's one of the best things they've added to this game, honestly. I love that I can just make this custom sign with that name. So walking through here, we have some ruins. We have 2 of Poseidon's statues here with the curse going through the veins, the blue curse there. As we walk through the shambles, you can see we have the side here of the building, very overgrown. Looks like a curse is taken over, sure, doesn't it? And moving on over, we have our awning and our nice facade, and you get a pretty good view of the decapitated Poseidon here. We'll walk all around, we'll skip the pins, and get a closer look here at our double-story ruined building. Nice and vegetated. Boom, there's Poseidon again. I love the green water. It's so beautiful. Gosh, the water is so beautiful in this game. Also, Weeping Willows, big check mark. Heck yeah, I love Weeping Willows. All right, moving on into the queue here, further up. You can see we get a nice view of the top there, and a nice view of the queue line as we walk through to the facades, cutting through the pig pen. You can see the other side of the facade there, but we're going to go ahead and go up here, get one more good view of everything, and voila, there's our fate. Gosh, it's one of my favorite things about hyper coasters is building a queue line that builds anticipation. So let's go ahead and walk into the station here. Bada bing, there it is. Beautiful view of the whole entire coaster here. So really excited to give you the POV here soon. But for now, let's go to the plaza and break down that before we end this episode. Alright, so here's our little plaza. Nothing crazy, nothing special, and I'll be honest, I kind of rushed through it, so there's some details that will be missing if this is like a long-term project, but to be honest, I was just really ready to get this project done and get this ride POV out and move on to the next thing. So real quickly, we have these little food buildings here that I just took blueprints, as silly as, and I don't even know how to pronounce this, Cardibitis? It's definitely not how you pronounce that, but these are 2 sea monsters to torture a river together. Anyway, moving on. I wanted to go ahead and give a shout out to, or a try to these planters here, just elevating up the land here. And it turned out quite nicely. Adding the ruins is a nice touch. The flowers are great in this game. I do want a little more options, though, and I'm sure they will come. But just showing off how beautiful these trees are, and wanted to throw some plants in here to make it look like grass, and I absolutely love it. Looks great. Definitely going to do that again. And also these fences, man, these fences are great. The Don't Die fence. They, kind of ground the park in reality a little bit. Just kind of reminds you, like, hey, like we're not in, mythical Greece here. We're actually in a theme park. So I added this fence all the way throughout. And that also brings me to the next section here, which obviously this path doesn't continue. It's not a full park. But this next section here is I added some ruins to the ride itself. So just wanted to add some theming to just kind of enhance the fact, like, once you're on the ride, like, hey, you actually are experiencing theming and such throughout. So I think that about does it for this ride. We're going to go ahead and jump straight into cinematics and POV here. So hope you enjoy, and I'll see you at the end of it.
Like Coven Village too.
Thank you so much for joining me with Curse of Cronus here. I had a blast building this ride, but I'm very excited to get on to some new projects. So if you've really been enjoying this project, make sure you like, favorite, and subscribe. and turn notifications on if you're really interested in seeing the newest content. I want to thank you all for a great, successful Planet Coaster 2 launch. At the time of me recording this voiceover, which is a different time from when I recorded the intro, the last video has over 2,000 views, and we now have over 100 subscribers on the channel, so that's really awesome. I didn't think I was going to get to this point this fast. So thank you so much for watching these videos to the end and giving Planet Coaster 2 the credit it deserves. So thank you so much for sticking around, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day, night, or evening, and we'll see you later. Bye.